Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and I'm not trying to get right up here. Any- Anyway, um, yeah, this should be our final episode on Autobiography of a Freedom Writer. This is the last chapter, chapter 11. It's called Reflections. Just a few pages is all it is, so let's dig into this. During the time we were engaged in the civil rights movement, no one knew how it would turn out. We were just trying to end racism, and as far as we knew, it had been such a formidable force it could not be stopped by the human sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of Americans killed fighting the Civil War. After the tour of struggle over civil rights, which was not unlike active duty on the front lines of war, many activists, including myself, returned to our communities withdrawn, introverted, and depressed because we felt that freedom had not been achieved. Most of us were wounded in one way or another from those experiences, but were offered little, if any, support for the well being of our physical and emotional health. Thus, the problems remain unchecked and untreated. I guess Ivanhoe Donaldson, a field secretary for SNCC, said it best. I think there was a heavy toll in that generation on people who were active. It's not to be romantic. I think the evidence is just there. Even today, you look around for what happened to SNCC people. I mean, some of them are just barely functioning. The task of being involved in the movement indeed took its toll on many of us. Research by former civil rights workers in the San Francisco Bay Area who were organizing a national network of movement veterans found in the year 2000 that workers in rural communities bore the brunt of the tension and among those who were experienced most of the problems. Some of us handled it better than others. If our other partners, whether they were in the movement, on the freedom rides, or from the media, were physically beaten, it was internalized as failing to perform our duties successfully. In other words, we didn't influence the chief of police enough to force him to control the mobs. It was on our watch that the mobs harmed our co-workers in that struggle. The result was post-traumatic stress syndrome at its best. Make no mistake, there are reasons for the stories heard about my fellow civil rights workers who allowed themselves to be overtaken by drugs, alcohol, and other dangerous vices. Clearly, I was not immune to the fallout myself. Yes, the weighty burden of race, segregation, hatred, and prejudice rested heavily on my shoulders. Yes, I was abused and scorned. And yes, I have wept for those who have died for the cause to be free, and I can still see the struggles of the little people. But it is the memory of what they endured that keeps me grounded. For this I know, their struggles were for me. I believe it is truly tragic that the stories of the little people, the ordinary foot soldiers of the civil rights movement, have hardly been told. Although the stories of the great leaders have been presented, efforts of the least of these anguish in invisibility. The heroic foot soldiers were the individuals who decided that it was time to do something for the cause. They decided that they had lived all of their lives to be free, and now, if necessary, it was time to die for that freedom. Had you asked any foot soldiers if they knew that they might be killed while participating in the next march or sit in, they would have responded with a resounding yes. Many would have told you they expected to be killed before they returned home from a demonstration. But the foot soldiers realized that there was power in numbers, and if their number came up to die, at least they had dedicated their lives to doing all that was humanly possible for a worthy cause. It is due to their efforts that civil equality was won for all Americans. What amazed me in the early 60s was that very few of my schoolmates were direct participants in the struggle. When I would sit in strategy sessions held in the campus home of Reverend Ed King, I would look around and count the number of people present. Typically, there would be anywhere from 12 to 15, and that's out of the entire student body. We didn't fault other students for not being there. We simply said that we had to make things better, and if not us, then whom? But what we didn't appreciate at the time, but have a better understanding of now, was that many of our fellow students had parents who were teachers, and their participation could have jeopardized the livelihood of entire families. Today, when I speak with my friends of the spirit, we often wonder how it was possible for some of us to do the things we did. We went through some hellish experiences together, which created unbreakable bonds of friendship. Many of us began under the guidance of Medgar Evers, and one of the things that he instilled in us was that our part in the movement exposed us to risk, that we did not that we did our part in the movement. We must always remember that we would be next to die. With this in mind, we allowed the man upstairs to chart our course. Wow, what a course, he said. While I knew that it would be dangerous to become a civil rights worker, I did not know how dangerous. It was not only a war, it was hell. Even now, people sometimes ask me, what are you doing for the cause? Of course, I explain a few small things, such as my participation as a poll worker, but the question hurts because my mind takes me back to those dark and difficult days. Days when black people lived in constant fear of white people. It takes me back to those experiences that I no longer wish to relive. For more than 40 years, I refused to share those experiences with anyone. My best friend in the movement was disowned by family members because of her participation in the movement. Some friends in the movement were beaten and some were shot, while others were tortured in the Mississippi jails. In more recent years, I have been asked to speak to school groups and civic and community leaders in the Chicago area where I continue to live about my experience in the civil rights movement, particularly regarding the freedom rides. I'm often asked, did the civil rights movement achieve all its goals? My answer, no. However, when we decided to take a stand for human rights and against discrimination, we made unheard of changes in Mississippi's tightly controlled caste system, which had been in effect for more than 300 years. We opened up Mississippi's closed society. We opened up Mississippi's closed educational system. We opened up the political process for blacks in Mississippi, which has in turn opened doors for other disenfranchised minorities in this great country. It is through the efforts of the movement that succeeding generations have been able to proceed with new constructions of humanitarian goals, and what should those goals be? This is a question that is responsible that as responsible citizens we should never stop asking ourselves. As for me, I do have a dream. All freedom riders and friends of freedom riders coming together as a virtual unit, using modern technology and promoting particular issues of human rights in the name of the freedom riders. I envision promoting the all for one doctrine for any and all civil rights activists who are in need of economic help and health care. We should give the interviews. We should teach our youth. We should never let America forget what happened to its children. Some time ago, a wonderful organization, the African American Leadership Roundtable Incorporated, asked, where do we go from here? I asked them in turn, how equal is education for the poor as opposed to those who are more affluent? As minorities, we are no longer barred from the front doors of higher education, yet our dropout rate is the highest of any group. We must change this by making sure our children are provided the best education that we can afford to give them. I told them that most people agree that decent housing is a basic right, yet millions of Americans live in substandard housing or have no housing at all. And I told them that they must become informed voters. Most of all, make sure that our families are registered to vote. There is no reason for any person, no matter their ethnicity or color, should not be registered to vote. We must begin our look at our immediate communities and zero in on these three problem areas: education, housing, and the political arena. Where do we go? I say to you, go with God. Remember, small things, like the little people, can grow into larger things, sometimes far larger than we dare dream. In the New Testament, it is said that the sower scatters seeds. Some seeds fall in the pathway and get stomped on and they don't grow. Some fall on the rocks and they don't grow. But some seeds fall on fallow ground and they grow and multiply 1,000-fold. Who knows where some good little thing that you choose to do will take root and what result it will bring in the years and generations to come. Be the sower, scatter seeds. So, yeah. And then they go through acknowledgments, book club discussion questions, author's notes, and about the authors. But that finishes the book. So, yeah. He gives his thoughts on living a life that he lived, on where things could and probably should go in future endeavors. Civil rights is not over. As a general period, a movement, yes, but we should never seek to stop growing civil rights. You know, it shouldn't matter the color. The poorest man should be treated as wonderfully as the richest. And it should not matter the wealth, the education. the religious beliefs. You should treat other humans as other humans. They are your fellow human beings. Be kind to your fellow men, to your fellow women. Unfortunately, that's something society seems to still struggle with. Unfortunately, you know, it's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm going to end the episode and the series for that book there. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.